I certainly hope that you enjoyed the film. I'm now going to introduce our panelist. In addition to the subject of the film, we're very honored to have a really diverse and interesting group of people that come from a variety of different professions and backgrounds from the local area. And we think we're going to have a really interesting discussion. And I will start by introducing Rebecca Rusch. Rebecca, who is fondly known as the Queen of Pain with a Heart of Gold, whether she's pedaling a mountain bike through extreme conditions or sports challenges or teaching at Join the Rush camp or clinic, she brings energy, positivity, and inspiration to everything she does. As a professional athlete for more than 3 decades, the 7-time world champion in multiple sports has continually tested her own limits and shattered the glass ceiling in any sport she tackles. Rebecca's work extends far beyond the start line as well. She's the best-selling author of Rush to Glory, event producer for Rebecca's Private Idaho, motivational speaker, firefighter, and cycling advocate. Additionally, she's raised over $100,000 for cycle-related charities through her adventures and events. In 2018, some of her activities include work at the Rush Academy camps, expeditions, and record-breaking rides, as well as adventures to bring awareness to historic trails and national monuments here in the United States, such as the Lewis and Clark Trail and Bears Ears National Monument. In addition, as the result of the journey which you just experienced along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, she is also raising funds to remove unexploded ordnances in Laos. And with that, I introduce Rebecca Rusch. Since we are blessed to have some males on our panel, I'm going to, for a while here, go girl, boy, girl, boy. Our second panelist is Michael Heuser. Michael is the president and CEO of Storm Entertainment, a motion picture finance, production, and worldwide distribution company that he founded in 1995. Storm Entertainment has arranged listen to these numbers, the full funding of 67 films, and throughout his independent career, he's been involved in the financing and/or distribution of more than 170 films. If I listed them all, we would be here all night, but a few that you may have heard of are Hurly Burly, Babette's Feast, True Romance, Glengarry Glen Ross, Dirty Dancing, Princess Bride, among many others. Michael is currently working on several film projects that are in active development. Michael Heuser. The next person I'm going to introduce is Sue Zapay. Sue was raised in Hingham, Massachusetts, and played professional baseball after high school for the Rockford Peaches, which was part of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. She was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York in 1989, and Hingham High School Athletic Hall of Fame in 2007. She also appeared in the 1992 Penny Marshall movie, A League of Their Own, which, by the way, we will be screening on April 18th at the Sarasota Lawn Bowling Association facility over near the Van Wezel. Sue began playing tennis in the 1970s and started her teaching career in 1973. As a tennis player, Sue achieved New England and national rankings in the 40-plus division. She has co-owned the Inglewood Tennis Club with her son since 1989, which I think just about gives her native status down here. She's the league director for Team Tennis Junior League in Manatee, Sarasota, and Charlotte counties, and serves on the Florida Youth Tennis Foundation Board of Directors. She's also a founding board member of the Women's Sports Museum, which will be located here in Sarasota. The Women's Sports Museum is dedicated to preserving the history of and promoting the excellence in women's athletics. And with that, I introduce Sue. Our next panelist is Reggie Williams, a name that many of you might recognize. More than a football legend, Reggie Williams is an experienced leader and inspirational social reformer. Reggie played 14 seasons at linebacker with the Cincinnati Bengals, appearing in 2 Super Bowls, Super Bowl 16 and Super Bowl 23. During his playing career, Reggie received numerous honors, including selection to the NFL All-Rookie Team, the Byron Whizzer White Award for Humanitarian Service, the Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year Award, and Sports Illustrated's Co-Sportsman of the Year Award. In addition to these humanitarian accomplishments, Reggie found time to be elected to the Cincinnati City Council in 1989. In 1993, Reggie became the Director of Sports Development for Walt Disney World Resort. And among his other accomplishments there, he oversaw the creation of Disney's worldwide sports complex, a state-of-the-art 220-acre multi-sport facility, and he championed the effort to grow Disney's involvements in sports. Among many lifetime honors, the Cincinnati Bengals honored Reggie last year as the top linebacker in its franchise history. And at Super Bowl 52 in February, Reggie was feted as one of the 50 Walter Payton NFL Men of the Year award winners. This award honors not only the players' excellence on the field, but also honors the players' volunteer and charity work. Reggie was also telling me before this that a fact that I think is rather fascinating. He says that he is the first NFL player that was interviewed in the locker room by a woman journalist. So I think that's pretty cool too. With that, I welcome Reggie Williams. Our next panel member is Linda Gold. She is a retired colonel from the U.S. Army, retiring in 2011 with more than 29 years of active duty service in the military. She served first as military intelligence officer and then as a fully accredited Latin American Foreign Area officer. Her career highlight was serving as the commander of U.S. military group in Guatemala from 2006 to 2009, and she was the first female Army officer to command a U.S. military group in Latin America. She completed her final tour of duty as the Deputy Chief of Studies at the Inter-American Defense College at Fort McNair, Washington, D.C. Since retiring from the U.S. Army and returning here, which is home in Sarasota, Linda has spent time volunteering for such organizations as the American Red Cross, the U.S. Master Swimming Organization, and has served on the board of the Military Officers Association of America, Sarasota chapter. Also, through her consulting business, Gold Solutions, Linda consults on various projects in the community, most notably for the Patterson Foundation on their military initiative. And with that, I keep saying recommend. I welcome Colonel Linda Gold. And last, but certainly not least, Lisa Moody. Lisa launched Tin Woman Productions in 1994 and served as a writer, executive producer in the television industry. She has been nominated for 3 Emmy Awards and has been honored with a win in 2007 for Saving a Species, The Great Penguin Rescue, a story that is near and dear to my heart. Lisa has written and produced for all the major networks and cable channels, including Discovery, Animal Planet, Nickelodeon, and CMT. In 2011, she joined Ringling College of Art and Design to spearhead a new digital initiative, ART, which stands for All Ringling Television Network. She currently serves as director of ART Network, teaches courses in production and content development and documentary production, and is currently interim director of marketing and digital strategies. And with that, I keep saying recommend. I don't know what my problem is. I welcome Lisa Moody. I guess I recommend them all anyway. Real quickly, before we get to some of the panel discussion topics, I wanted to ask Rebecca a couple of questions that relate to the film. It's on. They all should be live, we hope. You alluded a little bit in the film to your background and being raised by a single mom. Where did you start out life, and how did that lead you to become an extreme athlete?
I'm from Chicago suburbs, and I've always been a tomboy and kind of playing in the backyard, playing in the dirt, and really always an explorer, wondering not only what was in my backyard, but on the next block over, and really that has extended to my whole career. And I didn't plan to become a professional athlete. It really just, like my mom said in the film, it was this wanderlust of me wanting to see the world, and the bike and sports have allowed me to do that.
Fantastic. How did you end up in Idaho?
Idaho it's home now, and it's a beautiful place. I ended up there visiting a teammate of mine invited me and said, "Oh, come train for the summer." And like a lot of people said, "Ida what? Ida
Yeah.
where?
Ida
Idaho potatoes." And it's in the Rocky Mountains, and one of the most beautiful places I've been. When people ask me my favorite place to travel to, it's home.
Yay.
It's a beautiful spot.
Wonderful. And how did you, and again, some of this you alluded to in the film, but how did you decide to actually go on this quest via bike, and how did the idea of a film develop, and what was the general time frame of all that?
There was never an idea for a film. For me, the idea of being curious about my dad, and what happened in 2003, the first time I went to Vietnam for another race, and it was the first time I thought about, I was in the jungle, getting trench foot and heat rash, and really started thinking, is this what it was like for the soldiers? And it was the first time being in a place where he had been. I went and visited Da Nang Air Force Base and China Beach, and some of the places that I knew he had been, and that's where I really started feeling a connection in 2003. And we had a guide who, we stood on the battlefield of Khe Sanh, and the guide pointed across the hills and said, "Over there, that's Laos, that trail, you could see a road." He said, "That's the Ho Chi Minh Trail." And all I knew about it at that time was those words were, that's where my dad died. And this little brief, I took a picture that I still have and thought, well, I'm going to go there someday. And 2007, they found his remains, and wasn't really until 2012-13 where the idea of, I wonder if anyone's ridden the trail, my adventurous spirit, wanting to travel and explore, it's kind of my my career and his life started to come together finally in my 40s, and I pitched the idea to Red Bull to help me because of the logistics of trying to figure out even where the Ho Chi Minh Trail is. I needed help, and I didn't pitch a movie idea, I just pitched a project to go do, and I thought I'd be going and doing it, my own personal journey, and the story unfolded and became so rich that Red Bull Media House decided to take a risk and try to document it, and I'm really grateful that they did because it expanded from my journey now to a journey that has really helped heal other people and shared the story with someone else. And film is so important in that way. It would have been easier for me to do the trail without a film crew, but the fact that we did that is such a gift now because the ride continues to go on, journey continues.
One of the things that I noticed and was commenting on it a little bit, the wonderful photography, some of the drone photography that shows the incredible beauty of this entire region, also showing the damage that was done in Vietnam, and really, really impactful to me. And it seems to have had a really strong impact on you as well. The other thing I noticed is I kept feeling like, it was sort of camping by osmosis because there we were joining them on their journey, yet it dawned on me, if this is all happening and we're all seeing it, there's got to be a pretty good size film crew or, people related to the filming side following you around. Is that accurate?
Not really. If you know anything about film, we had a tiny crew. So we had six people, which whittled down to 4 after people got sick and had to go home. And they were all, the film crew were on motorcycles because the car, couldn't get to where we were going. And so not only were they trying to film with really nice equipment in the middle of the jungle, they were on motorcycles for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, carrying everything on their backs. So the logistics of actually trying to film, the fact that they captured anything, is pretty spectacular. And so the whole group altogether was probably 20 people, including, you saw my husband Greg and a bike mechanic. We had to have translators, we had to have government officials, we had to, there were people like that. But it really was a very small, tight crew, and I think you saw when I played my dad's song, we were all sitting around together as a team, and we really did become a very tight-knit family and a team. And the fact that they were able to get such great photography over there is really quite stunning, and the fact that we made it all back. We brought some parasites and some other things home, but
souvenirs.
Souvenirs.
Exactly. How did you find Huen, your Vietnamese writing partner?
Huen was my biggest worry going into it, because here I'm going on the biggest expedition of my life, as a 20-year experienced expedition athlete with a total stranger who doesn't speak fluent English. I never met her until that scene where I met her father. That was me meeting her for the first time. And I had a lot of trepidation about, would she be able to do it? Would we get along? And honestly, I didn't think she was going to be able to do it. Knowing her experience, she raced 2 hours. Her races were much shorter. She'd been a mom for a long time, retired. And so I was really quite, it was my biggest concern for the whole trip, but it ended up being really the biggest gift in the end, because I think the language barrier was actually a gift, because it did really force us to communicate non-verbally. She forced me to slow down and wait, and if it had been the Rebecca racer person flying as fast as I could, I would have missed a lot. And so she really did help me see the place through a different set of eyes and a different perspective, and we've become like sisters, and she's come to visit the United States, and we're really close now.
Wonderful, fantastic. I wouldn't doubt that others of you may have some thoughts and questions, and after we finish our panel, you're more than welcome to ask questions, and I'm sure everyone up here would be happy to speak with you individually, but I'm going to move on with some of the more general panel type questions right now. One of the things that I think is sort of a fact that I hear all the time, that one of the ways to break cycles or make changes is to educate younger people, to start young. And given that all of you come from a variety of different backgrounds and professions and interests and ages, everything, I wonder if any of you would care to comment on how we go about educating young girls and young women in particular to really reach for their dreams and go for what they want in this world. And anybody who has a comment is welcome to.
I'll go first. Hello?
You're on.
It works. How about that? Today, more women apply or go to college than men, a lot more. So I think by definition, women are going to one up the men, principally. That's the law of the land. Let's say. And in my company, before I had my unfortunate stroke, I had a lot of people, or a lot of women that were head of departments, head of accounting, head of legal, head of marketing, sales. They were all heads of departments, and because of their education, so I think when they start very young with the education, that you can't never give up, let's say, it'll happen. And it happens. It is in my community in Hollywood. The women are more aggressive and more not aggressive, just more able to do better than men. And it's
well,
a reality.
We know that.
Yeah, of course we know that. Yeah, but and it's something that I've kind of grown up to. I have 3 sisters, and I take it as a given. Not really something that I had to really think about. But that's just me, and that's just my community. But it is very, very strong.
Linda.
Thank you. Coming from a culture in the military where women in my era felt that they had to work twice as hard to be seen as equal, I would say what's happening now with young women, starting from very young girls, and you see a lot of the commercials on TV doing this, or little film clips too, is taking away the stereotypes of, Rebecca said tomboy. So, because we weren't expected to do that, to go play in the dirt, we were expected to play with dolls. Boys played with chucks, girls played with dolls. And it doesn't even have to be that defined. I think what's happening now, and a lot of it's from many of us that came before, that we're showing people that we can be anyone we want to be, but it's really important that the people around us, our parents, our family, our friends, educators, I think that's very important, are just letting us know and letting these young women know that they can do anything and to dream big. It's never too big to have that dream, and just keep going for it. And I think that's one of the big changes, and what we can continue to do to support is that there are no stereotypical roles anymore. What do you want to do? If you want to be in extreme sports, or if you want to be a film producer, or you want to go in the military, or just anything, that it doesn't matter whether you're a girl or a boy, go for it.
Sue?
Yeah, well, I want to say that the role model is something that's really important for young girls. And of course, when I was growing up, I also was considered a tomboy. I had 4 brothers. That's how I learned to play baseball and football and ice hockey and every sport that came along. It just was a natural thing for me to do. But when Penny Marshall made the movie A League of Their Own, that exposed what was possible to so many young girls in this country. It's incredible. They come up to me all the time and say, oh, I saw that movie, I love that movie, and my daughter loves it, now she wants to play baseball, or she knows she can play sports. And I think having a role model and having something like that film is so, so important for them. And as far as education is concerned, that's one of the things, being the founder of the Sports Museum, that's kind of my dream. And the whole idea of that is to educate young girls and show them what happened in the past. With Babe Dietrichson way back when, that hardly anybody knows who she was. And our league, when we played, they can see what happened and they can see how far we've come. And then maybe have education classes for them so they can go in and learn about what's possible. They can be a sports journalist or they can be whatever they want to be. But somewhere somebody needs to show them what can happen and teach them how to make it happen.
Lisa.
So I agree. I think that those role models, those visible role models are really critical. And I just want to make a comment too. I can only speak about my students that I've worked with at Ringling College, but I've seen in my 7 years there a big change even in the incoming students. It's interesting, even in Art Network, we have probably 90% of our students that are involved in Art Network are female. So that's a big change even in production. So I think those forward, outwardly facing role models are really important, but also the behind the scenes, I'm seeing a big change in the production industry as well. We have one of our students who's actually the president of our Art Network Club back here tonight filming for us, and she's female. So yeah, I've seen a big change.
I guess the only thing that I would add is at Walt Disney World, I was the first African-American executive that they hired in 1993. And there was a Disney culture that was created around certain images of girls. That quite honestly, one of the jobs that I had to do was to address that image, because the image of girls only as little princesses doesn't necessarily encourage a young lady to be anything and everything in the world. And especially if the only princesses are all white. And so at that point in time in 1993, that was the case. And so that has been one of the things that I think has been one of the cultural changes, which is creating a lot of opportunities, is that, institutions like Disney's are reevaluating how they're telling the story about the authenticities of little girls that turn into amazing, courageous people like Rebecca. And in that regard, they aren't all little skinny little blondes with blue eyes. And they have all different sizes and all different ages and have all different opportunities to make a difference in this world. And so companies like Disney, are finding their market share in even more dealing with the reality of women and their impact in the world. And Hollywood has a lot to learn. I mean, as you're talking about, I was thinking about Weinstein and all of the harassment that the women have suffered in that industry. And so it's really amazing that, someone like Rebecca got this film funded and made, because it tells a very important and needed story for people to see, football players too. And it's important because football is an exclusively male sport. And in that regard, it has all the other cultural deficiencies, which contributes to guys like me being hurt, for the rest of our lives. But, it's that kind of competitive sports. And there's a lot of great good with women with their passion and love and the ability to forgive that brings so much character, much needed character to the world of sport. And I can say that as a Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year, that we need more good in the world of sports.
Absolutely. Very well said. That leads into my next question, and it relates a little bit to what you said, Sue. I saw a clip of Gina Davis interviewed during the Oscars. It was something screened during the Oscar presentation, in which she was saying that when Thelma and Louise came out in 1991, she said to herself, this is it. This was going to be the moment of change. Women were going to be portrayed differently. Everything was going to change. And she said, then nothing changed. She says, it seemed that nothing really changed. I've also noticed since then, over the last 20 years, that there have been other times where I really thought, oh, now's the time, now's the time. But here we have this Me Too and Time's Up movement, and it appears to perhaps represent a true cultural change. Sue and I were also talking before this, and I really am wondering if now is the time where enough forces have come together. I read a quote in a biography of all people, Richard Nixon, that I was reading, and it was talking about Rosa Parks back in the 50s, refusing to give up her seat in Montgomery, Alabama. And this is what it said: though no one could foresee it, not then, when the laws of human nature and social order seemed so implacable, Parks' act of defiance was like the first tiny fissure that triggers an avalanche. The fissure becomes a rift, the rift a crack, the crack crept, then raced and branched out until, with a roar, the whole great mass of American complacency crumbled. When it was over, America had changed almost beyond recognition. Do you think with the movement toward equality and diversity through Me Too and Time's Up that we are really hitting a point of cultural shift and change? Sue?
Yeah, I think diversity does come, but it takes time. I mean, the old saying, you've come a long way, baby. I mean, back in my era, I couldn't wear jeans. We called them dungarees in those days. I think I was maybe 12 before my aunt finally bought me a pair. And, being able to climb a tree in a skirt or a little dress was not the thing to do. But we've come from that. Women didn't drive cars because they were home taking care of the babies in the kitchen. And now everybody drives. Women didn't go to college because that wasn't their thing. It wasn't because they weren't smart enough, but that was their role. I mean, look how far we've come. Now, as far as the Me Too is concerned, I think that's going to turn around as well, but it doesn't come overnight. Those things happen, and then they come slowly, I think, because it has to be fair. Whatever changes are made, it has to be well thought through and before any drastic changes are made. So, yes, something will probably happen, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think there's a lot on the Me Too and the Time's Up. For me, what it starts to come down to is it's men and women. Predominantly what we're hearing about are the women that were sexually harassed. Men are too. And it comes down to something basic, just what you just said, as far as we need more good. If we would all treat each other with respect and courtesy, we wouldn't have to have those kind of movements. But I do think that it's making an impact, that people are being heard, and that we're not going to see as much of it in the future because it's out from the shadows. It's out in the light. People will recognize the behavior. And part of it's what I think is happening with the different movements with the students right now. We're, I think, thrilled that we've got students out making their voices heard, but I also think it's very interesting what's happening in the background of that, which is, again, going back to being kind to one another and looking around you and not just going out behind a movement of Me Too, Time's Up, gun control, but we come back to, again, basic decency, goodness, respect, and courtesy amongst all of us.
I totally agree with that. And right now, I mean, I can't let this subject pass without saying we have a president right now that needs to be held just as accountable on this subject matter. And for any of his supporters that, for whatever rationalization they have, that for some reason, this guy, can say fake news about his egregious behavior towards women and how they can vote for him, how any man can vote for him. Totally, I mean, it hurts me to really think where our country is when we're on this subject. And so that's all I say.
Yay. Very well said. Lisa?
I will say this. I agree with you 1,000%, but without Donald Trump, I don't think that we would have had the Me Too movement. I think that he has propelled people to finally find their voice and to stand up against bullying, to stand up against, he's the absolute bully, but he has
He's a racist bully.
He's a racist bully and a sexist racist bully, but he has made people find their voice and get up and stand up against him. And it's broken through that complacency, and I think that, I don't have a lot of good to say, but that's one thing that I can say is I don't think that we would have found our voice without being pushed to this point, which is very sad, but.
Yeah. Another very quick quote that really struck me, this is from a woman named Jessica Valenti. She's apparently an author and a blogger. She said, "What people need to understand about Me Too is that it's a revelatory moment for men, not women. We've always known how bad things were." And the only reason that struck me, I'm not sure that that's a 100% true statement, but I think it ties into what you said, Reggie, the degree and extent to which it's really important that men support these efforts as well and do good and be good in the world, absolutely. Also tying into that, and I think it was Linda or Lisa mentioned the students at the Parkland shooting. One thing that really surprised me as a Florida resident, and I mean this really stunned me. The shooting occurs at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. As usual, platitudes, prayers and thoughts, is anything going to change? Nothing's going to change. And you may argue with good, bad, or indifferent with the degree and extent to which the law was changed by Governor Scott. But those kids had their voices heard, and I believe absolutely made the difference in getting something changed, maybe not perfect, but getting something changed. And that sort of kind of comes full circle with all of these questions. Is that sort of the key? I believe that a lot of legislators and perhaps the federal government will find students or young people a little difficult to ignore on any and all of these issues. Does that make sense to you, or do you think there's some other way to reach the decision makers and lawmakers other than perhaps voting them out?
I think it's very important that the young people are doing where we essentially failed. They're taking the beacon and they're doing it right, and I'm very proud of them. From here to California, I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of my kids for doing the same thing. I'm proud that I will go to the march on March 24th to basically say how proud I am.
Lisa, have you noticed it at Ringling? Has there been maybe a little bit of an uptick in interest in any and all of these issues?
There is. It's interesting because the class that I'm teaching right now is documentary production, and we're partnering with ABC7 here in Sarasota to produce a documentary. And we had already pitched to the network executives and had our topic when Parkland happened. And we came into the next class and talked about that in the class. And it was interesting because we actually looked at changing our topic, changing our direction, and actually having the students focus on the journey of those students that went up to Tallahassee. It was kind of in the midst, we couldn't really change direction at that point, but there was an intense interest, and I think that there still is. If we're able to in any way tell that story in the future, it's something that my students were very, very interested in and very passionate about. And I think the other thing too is that Gen X, this generation coming up, is so different than anything I've ever seen before. And I think that one thing that really hit me with Parkland was, and what I shared with my students, is it's unprecedented. I have never seen that before, where students or victims stood up, rose up, and were really heard like they were. and not backing down. This generation is not going to back down. They're not going to lay down. They are strong, and they're going to demand to be heard.
The only thing I will do on this current subject matter, and I am totally supportive of what these students are doing, but it is history repeating itself, okay, with young people putting themselves in harm's way. In this case, in the shooting, they had no choice about it, okay? But if we remember the Civil Rights Movement, okay, I specifically remember in 1963, 4 little girls being bombed on a Sunday morning in a church in Birmingham. I certainly know that there were a lot of high school students that went to lunch counters and got beat up on those lunch counters. I know a lot of the freedom riders, both white and black, were kids who challenged, the status quo of America in the 50s and 60s. So I'm 100% supportive of what they're attempting to do, but we all need to realize that right now nothing really has happened. Okay, there's been a slight change here in the state of Florida, but nothing nationally. And there's no effort right now by the Senate or the House or the President to do anything more. So right now the NRA has won again. And unless we support these kids even more emotionally in other ways, they're going to get shut down. And it's going to be the worst lesson for them to learn, because at least in my lifetime, when the 4 little girls, got bombed, and then 4 years later, Martin Luther King got assassinated, we've seen incremental progress. And, there has been a coming together to try to, get away from that sin of America. And guns killing kids in schools, guns killing anyone in church should be something that 100% of all Americans should say, we don't want that, and we don't want to elect any leaders that allow that. And true, politics will be one of the solutions, but it's got to be human decency that's got to really carry this day for these kids.
I do agree with you, and I think while Blood Road is an old story, I do believe we're back in that time again of I called my mom last year when I attended my first Women's March, my first march for anything ever, and she was marching, my niece was marching, my sister was marching, and Mom said, oh honey, yeah, well, your dad and I marched every weekend, in college, and I said, yeah, but Mom, we're going and marching for the same thing. And here we are again, and that was a very volatile time, and I do feel like we're in another volatile time again where people are rising and speaking up, which is great, but it's a tough time. But have we learned anything? And I hope so, but I'm not so sure. It does feel, I was very young at that time, but it does feel like history repeating itself.
This movie was a very, very powerful, it's done subtly, even though you brought up at the end about forgiveness. Forgiveness is something America has not challenged itself to do. South Africa, when they radically changed their culture, they had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And the whole purpose of that was to examine oneself and the changes oneself as a nation needs to make to move itself forward. The United States never went through that, and so they went through an extended period of trying to reinforce or bring back the path through Jim Crow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, now we're in an age where the real goodness is of the Vietnamese people to forgive America in any way, shape, or form and show you some love and compassion when your father basically was an aggressor. And when you look at the devastation on their country and their ability to forgive, this country, and it's really something this country needs to learn itself and live it and be a culture for that's why.
Politics aside, please. Let's not. Keep the politics in. No, let's hear Rebecca's story.
This is her story. I'm sorry that you don't want to hear me say, you're welcome to protest me, sir, after this meeting. How's that? And you're doing it now, so you're doing a pretty good job. Do you feel proud of yourself? Are you a big man now?
Does anybody else, Linda, do you have a comment? I don't know if you.
No, I think my only thought on one of the comments earlier was, again, it's great that people are out getting their voices heard, but it doesn't come down to one thing, passing a law on gun control. It again comes down to, we do have students and young people out in the streets trying to make their voices heard, and that is amazing. And as long as they realize that it continues, even if there were one perfect law that could be passed that could stop gun violence, that's not really what it's all about. It goes back, again, I don't mean to be repetitive, but the respect, the courtesy of living your life every day, and living it with the good, together, hearing people, letting their voices be heard, not being demeaning. Everyone has their own opinion. Yes, politics, no politics. And I think the film for me was very powerful. I wear a POW MIA bracelet. When I was a child, when we were stationed in Kansas during the Vietnam War, they were still doing, or after rather, because they were selling the bracelets. I actually got mine as an adult, and I wear it every day. Vietnam is a very poignant period of our history. I applaud you for the courage it took and the strength, both emotionally and physically, to go there. I think America does have a hard time forgiving Vietnam. I think we have a hard time forgiving ourselves because I think we left people there. And that's one of the reasons I wear my bracelet all the time. But again, there is no perfect solution for any one of our issues, so we have to learn from the bombings in the church. We have to learn from the Freedom Riders. We have to learn from Parkland. We have to learn that we've got to all do this together, whatever age, and continue to have our voices heard.
I got one.
You got one.
And again, I think my point about being unprecedented, because I mean, we have all been involved for centuries and eons in marching and protesting and uprising. This generation that I'm seeing, that I'm witnessing firsthand with my students is different. They are really different, and I think that I'm hoping that what they have to say is heard, and I hope it does stick, and I hope it does make change. And I'm also finding them to be very compassionate, a very compassionate and philanthropic generation as well. So it's just different than what I have seen before, and definitely in my own generation.
I mean, social media may be the difference. I mean, it may be the one ingredient because young people are so savvy about it that they can communicate in a way that kids my age weren't able to when back in the 50s and 60s. So maybe it will be technology that'll help America realize its own greatness.
I noticed, obviously, with the song that your father sings, which of course reminded me so much of my generation and my childhood as well. And I've heard it said that my generation, the baby boomers, the folks that grew up in, even the early 50s and the 60s, that we communicated often by song. There were protest songs or songs that generated emotion or thought or feelings or expressed what we were doing, and that social media may be the new songs, if you will. It's the way to communicate and get ideas around and through. Yeah, and obviously instantaneously, which is so incredibly different. And I think it's true. There are always in almost any group of people a number of different sides that are presented, and the being kind, being good, voicing opinions, which we all have, and obviously listening to each other with respect is, I think, very, very important. And I think the message of this film, certainly the message that you get from the people of Southeast Asia and our panel as well. Sue, did you have a comment? I didn't know if you did. Okay, all right. We have a couple of minutes before we...
the one change that hasn't happened is the acceptance of the continued military action. Right now, the United States has military people in 150 countries and feels free to invade, you name it, and is threatening to invade North Korea. And I think there's going to be a war with Iran because that's going to neutralize the democratic wave. That's the way to do it, to get the people to rally around the president, is go to war. And I think that's what's going to be happening soon. And I was with the peace movement way back when, and I was one of those anti-Vietnam protesters. And we didn't stop the war. The North Vietnamese beat the U.S. military, and that's the only reason the U.S. military left, because they lost the war. And here we are now with the military budget continuing to go up, both parties voting for another $150 billion for the more military when there's no money for just about anything you want to name. So that's the one thing I'm saying is, and Rebecca, you didn't get into that too much, right? And that was good. It was there. But that's where I think the move that hasn't happened yet, and the sheriff has proposed in Sarasota that now going to be armed men walking around every campus in Sarasota County. That's the sheriff's proposal. That's what we're going to get out of Parkland is armed teachers, the president proposes, but the sheriff proposes armed men. That's what's going to happen. He wants a decision on that next week. We can't consider any alternatives. Maybe that isn't the way to go. More guns isn't a solution to gun violence. But that's specifically this military thing. There is no movement, no question, nobody in the street, nothing happening about the military. And this is the real thing. We're not being decent to people. We're not listening to anybody in Syria or in North Korea. We're not listening. We're telling them, and we're going to bomb you freely. Not even think twice about it. Of course we'll just bomb people when it would be totally not okay for anybody to be bombing us. Drones, the U.S. puts out 7 countries, drones. Would we like one drone, one time to drop one bomb in the United States? It would freak us out. But the U.S. government does that, well, I even think twice. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, if you could pass it back there. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that I too wear a bracelet. It has my dad's name on it. He was shot down over Laos in 1966 and is still missing. I am sitting with a group known as the Vietnam Brotherhood. We came to this film expecting to hear about Rebecca's journey. I looked you up, of course, checked out your dad, your family, anything I could, as well as your ride down the trail. I do want to tell you that these veterans that I'm associated with and that are here tonight, many of whom were in country, they are now part of an organization that exists to help current day veterans. And they do an awful lot in the way of forgiveness and caring and getting out there, in addition to fighting for their own health care and other issues that currently affect our veterans. So on behalf of them, I want to say they helped me, and I'm glad they're here.
Thank you so very much for letting us know that. We really not only appreciate your prior service, but the work that you're doing today. I very much understand how important that is, as I believe everybody else does here.
No, I
Linda?
just wanted to say that I'm not sure if everyone is aware that March 29th is Vietnam Veteran Day for the United States. It's a chance for us to remember and recognize individuals that served and sacrificed for their nation. And here in our region at Sarasota National Cemetery, on Thursday, March 29th, there will be a program out there to remember. It'll be a great place for forgiveness on all sides. It's from 9:30 to 11. It's sponsored by Tidewell and some other organizations, and Alpha Company of the Vietnam Brotherhood will be the color guard out at that event.
Great.
So we invite you to come to that.
Wonderful. Yes, ma'am. Let me just repeat the question. The question was, what are the plans for getting Blood Road either publicly released or presented in that fashion?
Thank you for asking that. I've been on film tour for about a year. We released just last March and been on the festival tour, You can get it on iTunes, Red Bull TV, it's free, and my mission now is really to get this film out in as many places as possible. You can host your own screening. That's what we did here. And so the website bloodroadfilm.com has all the information on how to see the film, how to share it with somebody else, or how to host your own screening. And my big hope for the film is that it does keep spreading far and wide, because I do believe that while, yes, it's great that the younger generation is speaking up and speaking out, we still have to do it too. And organizations like the Brotherhood and Vietnam Vets and all of us need to use our voices as well. And I really do hope that this film can be a voice for that, whether it's education in universities. And so I don't know where it goes next. If you guys have ideas, you can reach me through my website as well. And my mission is really to follow my dad's instructions to be good and to try to help clean up Laos. It feels like a big job, but I'll do what I can in one small way. And so I appreciate you asking that, and all of you for coming, because the biggest gift of this story is that it's not just my story anymore. It's becoming a larger one, and hopefully we can learn to forgive from something like this that's a vehicle for that.
Yeah. Maybe it's the crevice that turns into a crack, that turns into a fissure, et cetera. There was a gentleman back there who had a question.
Did you plant him?
Thank you. No,
Yeah,
I didn't.
really?
I did not plant you. So the questions were how to get involved. One, with the Cleanup with Laos. I work with a group called Minds Advisory Group, and they clear up war countries all over the world. I specifically target Laos because that's where my father was shot down. The bracelets I have outside, some of you already bought them, are made from bombs cleared in Laos, and each one goes back to clear up 12.5 square meters of land in my dad's name. So you can get bracelets through bloodroadfilm.com or RebeccaRusch.com. So or out in the lobby today. And really what I'm inspired to do for my next rides is kind of along the lines of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, is riding the iconic trails in the world and telling the history of what they are, and telling the current events of what's happening along the Silk Road or the Inca Trail or the Lewis and Clark Trail. So my dad's kind of given me my next mission of using my bike to tell history and also current events and go on some grand adventures. So I don't yet know how those plans are going to work out. I would love to make a documentary series about kind of a history series. So you can talk to me afterwards if you want to help me with that. And thank you so much for coming and the question. It's been a really fantastic afternoon.
Rebecca, tell them what's inside your bracelet. Tell them what's inside it.
Oh, yeah, so each bracelet is engraved with the words "Be Good" in my dad's handwriting, as you saw in the film, and then in Lao, in my handwriting right next to it, the translation of "Be Good," which is UD. So it's a nice little reminder, like we've all talked about, to be good to each other and to ourselves.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. We have another screening at 7. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. Yeah.
My brother was killed in Afghanistan in 2011. His daughter was 14. She missed the first 2 days of high school to attend his funeral. And so, because you as a Gold Star daughter, I would like to know if you have any words of advice that you can share with me maybe later, so that I can help her as she pursues her journey in life without her dad, my brother. And then second, have you heard of the organization called TAPS? Because I think the story that you share is one that would resonate with that organization, which stands for Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. And I found them after my brother died, was killed in Afghanistan, and it helped me immensely.
Thank you for sharing that. I've not heard of TABS. I'm starting to learn about a lot of amazing organizations that help with PTSD. For me, I've always used my cycling and my sport as my therapy, and those two worlds are coming together now. And the advice that I would say for your friend, and this was something that was very surprising to me. I never knew my dad. I was 3 when he died. I don't have any of my own personal memories. And, discovering him at age 46, the biggest shock to me was that he is still very much a part of me, and he is still very much alive in me, and I just didn't know that. I wasn't listening. I didn't hear it. And by going and finding him, it's resurrected him through people who served with him, through my mother, my sister. And so for your friend, I do believe that, even those who are gone, they're in our cells and in our blood, and we really can't get rid of them even if we want to. And so he is still very much a part of her, and will be for the rest of her life. She just needs to recognize him and let him come out and be there.
It's his daughter.
It's his daughter.
Yes.
Yeah. They're still connected.
Yeah.
I do believe that.
Thank you.
I'm sure Rebecca will be happy to speak with any of you or answer any questions before the next screening, as would any of the panelists. I just want to very quickly mention there is a flyer out front as well by Rebecca's merchandise that talks about the next film in the film series, which will be on Wednesday, April 18th, A League of Their Own, the 25th anniversary screening, which also is honoring the 75th anniversary of the start of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, so it's kind of a fitting time. That's going to be a moonlight movie on the bayfront. The gates will open at 6:30 at the historic Sarasota Lawn Bowling Green, right by the Van Wezel. And just keep an eye out for information on that. The general admission to the movie will be free, and given the weather today, we do have a rain venue right next door if in case there's a problem. I want to thank all of you so much for joining us this afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed the movie and the panel, and with that, we'll close. Thank you.